Here we are.
Are we live?
We are live.
Right.
Just gonna open you.
Hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope the switch of days wasn't too confusing. We had the classes yesterday, so we'll be doing Wednesdays up until Christmas. Sorry, start again. Doing Thursdays up until Christmas. And for those of you who live within striking distance, from Sunday onwards I'm having my annual exhibition at Trading Boundaries. So that's opening Sunday, allegedly. I don't know how long we'll stay open for, but the plan is to keep the exhibition going up until the last day of December. So right up until the new year. I come into this and I'm thinking, my God, I've done nothing since last week. But sadly, this has been an incredibly busy week, and so that's literally the truth. There's been nothing changed since last week. But I have my plans, and I'm hoping it will move fast. Well, one of my plans was to get this painting finished and into the exhibition.
You can carry on painting it live in the exhibition.
Wouldn't be the first time. I did a very big painting once, a 6 foot by 9 foot painting. And a friend of mine who was really nice, but he came up really hesitantly to tell me I got something wrong with the painting. And he said he didn't know whether to tell me or not. I said, well, it's too late now, you've got to tell me. And he said, well, I hope you don't take offence. And he told me, and I thought, good grief, he's right. I've got to change that. And so, yeah, that was, as everyone else was sort of milling around the gallery, and in between commenting about where pictures should be hung, I had to nip out, get paints and make the changes. So that's happened. And I have had paintings in Trading Boundaries where we've had to put a notice up about wet paint. It was kind of a dramatic overstatement because the paint dries within 40 minutes easily, but it wasn't dry when it was hung.
Just to anyone joining now who missed the beginning, last night Roger was doing a class which we announced last week, so that's happening on Wednesdays, and the live sessions for all you guys will now be on Thursdays up until Christmas.
Yeah. So what I'm going to finish today is enough of the waterfall. I want it to look rough and sort of chunks of water falling rather than a steady stream of angel hair. And I'm going to get to that point pretty soon. And then I'm going to start painting the floating islands in here, which are part of the close to the edge story. And then I'm going to put more rocks in front of that. So this is definitely going into the background as the painting develops.
Apparently we've got good sound tonight. I'm really pleased by that. See, it's the small but humble, cheap microphones that don't let you down.
Well, right, we put them in a sensible place, I guess.
Yes.
We did have this stand for a very fancy mic, but I haven't figured out how to get the iPhone to say hello to that properly yet. We'll get round to it.
The fancy mic's in disgrace, hanging from a stepladder.
Is that right?
Yes. Looking dejected, if a microphone can look dejected. Do you have a favourite waterfall?
Do I have a favourite waterfall? I remember going around both Wales and Scotland with lists of waterfalls and photographing them and sitting with them and sort of. But they're relatively small. There's nothing like Niagara or anything like, they're tiny relatively speaking. But the one I like best, I did actually put into the painting for Rick Wakeman's Myths and Legends of King Arthur painting. So that was one I really liked. And it's quite small, I mean, younger and fitter, I could easily have jumped across it. It was that kind of scale. But quite dramatic too for a small one. And then there's others like the Swallow Falls in Wales. I like that.
You're being asked for some news on the house.
Well, very sadly, the person who was in charge of that project got COVID, and he says that he's well. And I'm meeting him tomorrow to get the project back underway again. So we've had a few weeks of hiatus there. Minor things that didn't delay it, but could have, was the badger that moved in onto the site that we were going to move it to, but we found a suitably different site without a badger, so that was good. So yeah, in that respect it's going okay. So hopefully when we meet up tomorrow we'll accelerate things. But it's been, well, everyone knows how tricky these things are, so when it's moved, I mean, we haven't put a post on it till I have to say safely, moved the beehives. The bees were moved to a new site in Forest Row.
Very scenic. They'll like it there.
Yeah. I hope they will, yeah. I keep standing back from this and I keep thinking, that looks like there's been a big splash behind that rock. So I might look at that and sort of give that a little bit more attention in a second. I am thinking though that I'm pretty close to having done enough for the waterfalls for now. There might be more work done on them later, but I did find Niagara absolutely breathtaking though. And it was astonishing to realise that although it was absolutely breathtaking and stunning, it's only a fraction of its original scale because a lot of the water was diverted for the power station. So it's not as it was a century ago. But definitely pretty impressive. If I ever thought of doing a trip just for waterfalls, I think I'd probably like to go to Iceland in the spring and see I can't remember how to say the name of it now. It'll come to me.
Do you like the Welsh landscape as well, Roger?
I do, yeah. I love it. And the borders too. I love the Herefordshire landscape. When I was a child living in Hong Kong, I loved the England that was depicted in Rupert Bear. It was kind of like my romantic idea of what it would be like living in England. And don't forget, I had spent a lot of time in England, backwards and forwards, so it wasn't as if I didn't know. But that was the England at its ideal. And I later discovered that Alfred Bester, who painted those pictures that I had an ideal view of England, he lived in Wales, so a lot of his inspiration was Welsh.
What inspired your Yes album covers?
All of them?
All of them, in one sentence, please.
Okay. Well, I said it silently. Did you get it?
Got it all.
Good.
That's your answer, guys.
Okay. The first album I worked with them on was Fragile, and when I first talked to the band about ideas for the cover, I took with them an illustrated book from turn of the last century, Lohengrin, illustrated by Willy Pagani, and I talked about a narrative. So my first pitch to Yes was not a painting at all. It was an ancient, well, not that ancient, an old book and a narrative. The old book was to show how it would be fun to do it, and the narrative was the story which I'm looking at this painting being part of for the anniversary of Close to the Edge. So that was a story, and the pictures that fitted into that story were Fragile, Close to the Edge, and then the triple album Pathways had 4 paintings that all were part of that narrative. Relaya, Tales from Topographic Oceans, and Yesterdays were all a step aside. They weren't part of that narrative. But the landscape in Tales was Land's End in Cornwall. Except for the rocks in the middle, which was Bremen Rocks in Yorkshire.
Do you do any art restoration?
You mean of my work?
I think just in general, someone's asking if you do, if you have any advice on methods.
Not really, no. I definitely have had to restore my own paintings that have been damaged by carelessness or time or whatever. And it very much depends on how they were originally done, whether they were watercolours or ink or acrylic or a mix. Frankly, acrylic is way the easiest to fix. I've had 3 paintings which have literally had holes torn right through them, and they were surprisingly easy to repair. The hardest, or the almost impossible to seamlessly repair, are watercolours. So my normal way of exhibiting watercolours is framed and behind glass.
We've got some fireworks outside.
It's Lewis and it's that time of year, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if everyone will have a similar thing in their towns if they're not from Lewis. We do bonfire night big over here.
Yes, Lewis is tiny. I think the population is, I'm going to get these figures wrong and get all kinds of people telling me off, but I think the population of Lewis is about 17,000. But it is the county town of Sussex, East Sussex now, but it was the county town of the whole of Sussex. And on bonfire night, they can have up to 70,000 people here. So that's over 4 times the population. And there are, I don't know, several dozen bonfire societies marching through the town and celebrating. It's very spooky. It's kind of weirdly medieval. And it's, I don't know, I always enjoy it. I love it. So it's celebrating 5th of November. It's not, obviously, Americans celebrate 4th of July. And it's always had that quality of being slightly illegal, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the police have sometimes collaborated, but more often tried to close it down.
Tried being the operative word.
It's a difficult one, yes. I do remember one year when they introduced parking meters into Lewis, it was seriously unpopular. And someone went round blowing them up.
Yeah, I would hazard a bet there was more than someone.
Yes, I think it was
half the town.
a conspiracy that left no one out, probably. And I remember one of the councillors being interviewed, and she said, well, it's Lewis, and there's a lot of people here know about explosives. So the following year, they removed them all. They took all the parking meters out just for the bonfire.
Yeah. They hid them in some sort of PTSD for parking meters building, secure lockdown centre, whilst they quaked in fear.
Well, it shows you the limitations of democracy. No matter how much people protested, no one was listening.
Did you do a couple of IT Bites album covers?
I did, not a couple, one.
One.
Well, I did one album cover and I can't remember now, at least one single. And in my absent-minded way, I laid it all out, the pictures, and when I did a layout for my book in 2000 and when was it? It was 2008, I think. Dragon's Dream. If you go through the book layout, there is a page of It Bites work. But somehow I forgot it and it never made it to the end. And I was considering, as I'm finishing work on the layouts for the new book, of including the It Bites stuff.
How do you decide which pictures to repaint and print to sell?
To what?
How do you decide which pictures to repaint and print to sell?
Oh, bloody hell. I don't repaint pictures to sell. I might revisit something which I really like, but I might like to look at it from a different point of view or do something differently, but it's not specifically to sell.
Would you consider awakenings from Yes songs
What
to do that with?
to redo?
I think so, yeah.
It was redone. It was redone for Yes Songs was live at the Rainbow, and Yes released a box set, I think called Progeny, which was 4 or 5 live shows from America from the following year, and the plan was to revisit the paintings so that they were recognisably the same subject but from different perspective, different time of day, generally different, and Awakening got done again then.
Can you talk about your Gentle Giant Octopus cover?
Yeah. Was there a question going with that?
A brief dissertation on the cover, please.
Okay. Well, my recollection was, and I can't really remember the whole story about how it came about, but it was a bit of a rush, and I finished it when I did the print of it, which was just a few years ago. I did a much more complete version of the octopus. I didn't. Well, let's start again. Very often when I paint creatures, I change something. I mean, the owls in Blind Owl and the Old Bridge are both portraits of real owls. But a lot of creatures, like a lot of the dragonflies, for example, in the Yes Dragonfly logos, are a combination of the silhouette of a dragonfly, the colouring or the patterns of moths, colourings of tropical fish. So they're a mix. The butterflies that I've done for Yes logos all have a recognisable butterflies, but they all have cat's eyes in them, which are change them again. So I do change them, and when I did the octopus, I did change the octopus. The original painting had manta ray, the eyes from a manta ray rather than from an octopus.
Did you ever get asked to do a Genesis album?
Oh, what?
A Genesis album?
No.
Well, that answers that question.
I guess it does.
How did you make the Paladin picture, the one with the robot on a mechanical horse?
How did I make it?
Yes.
Well, the robotic horse. I drew it as a horse, and then I tried to imagine how it would work if it was partly mechanical. So it was a kind of biomechanical horse. Is that the direction that the question was going, or was it going somewhere else?
I'm not entirely sure. If Anders, if you'd like to follow up that question with anything more specific, please do.
I mean, the challenge for me, whether it was the elephants in Ossibisa or the horse in Paladin, was to make it as credible as possible. To make it so that it would actually work if it was built. So that was always something I wanted to. I wanted it to, as I say, look like it would work.
I might need to move the camera. Roger, your hair is causing so much light refraction that you're like a glowing angel when you're in that corner.
Oh yeah, that's my nature, right?
Yeah. Shining through
Okay,
your
well,
true
what
state.
can I say? I'll finish this corner and move it.
I'll try and move it a bit.
Yeah, that'll do for now.
Oh yeah, so this is Andus on the horse. Did you cut out the drawing and glue it to the watercolour background?
Oh, right, is that what he meant? Yes, actually, yes, I did. It wasn't, the background was actually enamel, not watercolour. And I couldn't draw on it because the surface was, well, it was like trying to draw on glass. So it's very difficult. So I drew on stretched paper and then combined it. I wouldn't do that now. And even if I wanted to, I'd do it in Photoshop. But then, yeah, I did a number that way as montages.
How did you get the marble effect on some of your early paintings, like Octopus?
What I would do is I would draw very loosely. I'm talking about a sketch lasting a couple of seconds on the floor on a board that's exactly flat, and I do it with a lot of water. I put a lot of water in and I'd move it around how I wanted it to, and then I'd spray the board in a number of colours, so none of it was just one colour, and I'd spray it with aerosol cans of paint. I didn't have an airbrush at the time. And where it landed on the water, it would move, the water would flow. So you would get that slightly watery flowing pattern. It's pretty similar to marbling. It is a form of marbling. The normal way to do marbling is you have a basin of water and you put oil paints on the surface, and then you dip your paper onto the water's surface and it picks up the oil. But it's all basically, the idea is that you're working with two mediums which don't mix. And typically anything like an oil-based, or in this case it was probably an oil-based enamel, they float on the water, so being lighter than water.
Can you talk about any new artists that you like?
Any new artists that I like?
Yeah.
That's interesting, actually, because I was a guest at a conference on representational art in California at the Lutheran University, and I came across a lot of artists there. Some I knew, some who'd been working as long as I had or longer, and some were brand new at it. And I was very impressed with the quality of their work. And what I might do is answer that question in a Q&A, so I can do some research. I can go and look at the names and see if I can find images. But yeah, I think there's some incredibly clever artists out there today. Yeah, I would find it very stiff competition if I was starting out now. Okay. That looks like you would get wet standing under that, doesn't it?
Very much so.
Okay. I'll have a look at the foreground now. I'm not saying that's finished, but it might just be finished enough.
Were you on LSD when you painted the early album covers?
Not really, no. I mean, not really, not at all. I led a very abstemious life. I never drank, didn't smoke. That's not the whole picture, but being stone cold sober seemed to me part of the deal of painting. I looked to distract myself, very much so, but not through LSD. I was once tempted to try it, and not that I'm recommending it, but it was utterly amazing and unlike anything I'd experienced. But scarily powerful. I wasn't tempted to make a habit of it, that was for sure.
What happened with the original picture of the second Green Slade album you did?
What happened with what?
The original picture of the second Green Slade album.
Right, that had that very complicated title, Bedside Manners Extra. And it was probably the last time I ever let a printing company hold a painting. The idea being to, make sure they got the colours right, which sadly and incidentally they didn't. But in the process of having the painting there, they had a fire.
Oh.
And it apparently got destroyed in the fire.
Oh dear.
So there was interesting issues with insurance company.
Did you have to sort of prove how much the painting was worth or something?
I can't remember the exact way the argument went, but there was some bit of it like that, and I said, well, you have two choices, return it or pay me. In the end they did, so I guess they did accept the valuation in the end. And I would have rather had the painting, because if you sell a painting it still exists in the world, but if it's destroyed by fire then it's gone. I have often been tempted to redo that one, but clearly not tempted enough to actually do it. So, but it does cross my mind a lot. I've done a bunch of paintings with a similar kind of weird Dickensian atmosphere, and I keep thinking, I'm going to go back to that painting. Not done it, but might.
Ottavio Zata, I'm not ignoring you, sorry, there's just a lot of questions coming through.
Aha.
So you're asking about, Roger, how did you start to paint and what are your inspirations?
Well, I've told this story many times, so excuse me, but I will keep it brief. I went to art school with an idea that I would like to paint natural history subjects and design the future. But because the principal at Canterbury College of Art, which is where I started, came across my exam results one day and determined that I shouldn't be doing fine art if I had maths and physics, or some aptitude for maths and physics. He suggested I leave the fine art course and move over to doing industrial design, which was fine because, as I say, one of my ambitions was to design the future. And I did. And when I moved on to the Royal College, what I wanted to do most there, although I was in the furniture school, I was there because David Pye, I was told David Pye would let me get on with what I wanted to do, which was figure out a kind of architecture that would actually appeal to people, that would work, would make people feel comfortable and at ease rather than miserable and oppressed, I guess. And he let me do some work on that, and that's what I did, and I really enjoyed it, and that's still something I really enjoy and want to get back and get on with. But I was very lucky. I designed a chair that looked like a sea urchin, but it collapsed and gave very good lumbar support, and it got an enormous amount of publicity in an exhibition at the place called the Design Centre, which no longer exists, but was in the Haymarket in London. And as I say, it got a lot of attention, and a company approached me to design something that I'd also done at college, which was a sort of landscape seating, and to do it for Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club. But instead of having a year to develop the ideas and work out the best way to make it, we had, I think, less than 3 weeks, 2 and a bit weeks, to design and build it and have it ready for an opening concert with Dizzy Gillespie, who's a jazz trumpeter, and his trademark is a slightly weird shaped trumpet. And the contract was pretty tight. They had to be ready for his concert, and it was, as I say, it was only a couple of weeks. So I designed a very simplified version of it, but we did design it and build it and have it ready in 2.5 weeks. But after it was open, and it was quite a success. Ronnie Scott and his team liked it. I said, it's a pity we didn't have more time, because it could have looked like this, and I showed them another picture from my sketchbook. And instead of reacting to the furniture, they looked at a picture which looked very demonic, and they said, ooh, could we use that as an album cover for a band we're managing? The band was called Gun, and they just had a hit with a single called Race with the Devil. So I said, yeah, why not? I'll redo the painting then. And I did. And on the strength of that, I got a bunch of other jazz album covers to do. And the pressure from the record company to keep them absolutely in line with modern graphic design thinking. I'm talking about modern in the sense of, then it was the 60s, nothing's changed, it's still the same, and nothing had changed since the 30s. So it was kind of a continuous, incredibly conservative profession. So I wanted to do something different. And the A&R guy at Columbia, which became Sony CBS later, was David Howes. And he'd moved on. He'd started in another record company called MCA. And I went and saw him and I said, look, I'd like to do something different to the jazz. And he said, oh, okay. I've got this band called Osibisa. So I did a cover for Osibisa, which was surprisingly successful for, at the time, a relatively unknown band. And that changed everything for me. On the basis of that, I got a poster contract and we sold millions of posters. We did sell huge quantities. So that was wonderful fun. Okay, so we're about at the time where we should be winding down. We'll be back next Thursday. Is that okay with you, Christopher?
Well, that's fine with me.
Perfect. So we'll be back next Thursday. The exhibition, for any of you, as I say, who are in striking distance of Mid-Sussex, is opening on Sunday for 2 months. And the shop on the website is now selling the calendars. You can actually see them, and a new range of posters is going up. And we're doing a new print, at least one, maybe two, for the exhibition. It is planned to do two, but I don't think they'll both be ready for the opening night. So, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, everyone. I'll write your questions down that didn't get asked. I'll send them in for the Q&A, so don't worry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.